morning, everybody. Today we have some news. Peru is about to sign a free trade agreement with the Scandinavian peninsula, which consists of Denmark, Sweden, and Finland. Reporting live, we have Christina, Salma, Andrea, and myself, Mauricio. Let's dive into it.
First, regarding language and business practices, in general, people in Nordic countries are very direct when talking and reserving their personal expression, maintaining distance between work and private lives. They also tend to not use a lot of body language when maintaining eye contact. They can seem unenthusiastic, however, they're extraordinarily open and informal. Also, even though none of the Nordic countries have English as their first language, most of the population speak it very well. In Sweden, the communication style is participative, with everyone encouraged to share their perspective. There's a tendency for Swedes to avoid a confrontation and refrain from raising their voice. They consider it very rude to interrupt others when talking. They usually take turns and indicate they have finished with a pause of silence. Also, they value their personal space. In Denmark, plain speaking, directness, and frankness are admired qualities. They are low-key and inexpressive people in public. Danes prefer informal communication. Professionally, you should address people with honorifics. Professional titles are not necessarily expected, but it is polite to use them when addressing older people. To greet each other, they use handshakes, and there is no physical contact beyond that. Lastly, in Finland, they are quite reflective and somber. They are unwilling to speak unless they have something of importance to say. They don't like small talk and interpret active silence to be an important part of a normal way to communicate. Also, it's good to touch or to be too close to other people. They can sound monotone and don't use a lot of body language. On the other hand, in Latin American countries, like in Peru, Mexico, and Colombia, communication is very indirect. They use a lot of hand gestures and like to have physical contact when talking. They are also very happy, enthusiastic, and very energetic speakers. In this way, they can seem very loud for the Nordic people. They also use a lot of slang in non-formal situations, but they are very respectful and formal in academic or business environments. Next, Christina will help us understand how to build business relationships in this country.
Thank you, Andrea. So relationship building processes are more or less the same for all Northern European countries, as they have very common cultures and values. In Nordic countries, you need to understand your potential business partner's profile and understand what they are looking for. Then you must always use collected data and research when approaching a business opportunity, as data-driven approaches are appreciated. Also, when there are some protocols to be taken into account. Business relationships should be friendly and familiar, but always kept formal. There needs to be a clear distinction between personal and professional relationships, and this also applies to humor. You should keep a serious tone. Finally, when trying to close decisions, you should avoid appealing emotions, as decisions are made on numbers, facts, and logical deductions. On the other hand, Latin American countries have a different approach. Personal relationships can be more important than business objectives. Therefore, you should have in-person meetings and take time to build confidence and trust for any potential business partner. Also, building professional relationships usually takes time, and closing deals requires building personal relationships and practice. So this sets apart Nordic countries and Latin American countries, as Nordic countries are more data-driven, strategic, and formal, whereas Latin American countries mix personal and professional lives and have strong personal connections.
Adding to what Christina said, let's take a closer look at the globe practice cultural dimensions and their preferences in leadership practices. In the area of social cultural practices, Scandinavia presents high scores. They have a high institutional collectivism and a very high score on uncertainty avoidance. This indicates that citizens promote group loyalty and encourage collective distribution of rewards, actions, and strongly endorse rules and procedures. The scores on future orientation and gender egalitarianism are in medium range, but higher than South America, indicating that it is less male-dominated society, plans out for the future, and engages in future-oriented behaviors, more than Peru, Colombia, and Mexico. Finally, there is a very low level of power distance, which means that the power is shared and is widely dispersed. And there is also a low level of in-group collectivism, which suggests that there is generally self-reliant with fewer family ties. They also have a lower score of assertiveness. Now let's take a look at the globe leadership's dimension. They present a high charismatic type and a high participative characteristic, which means that people from Norway, Sweden, and Finland prefer leaders who demonstrate leadership that involves participation, charming personalities. These characteristics that are endorsed include a realistic vision, high performance, integrity, and decisiveness. They also present medium team-oriented and medium autonomous qualities, which means that they value leaders whose characteristics include developing outstanding teams and using their administrative and interpersonal skills to create a cohesive working group. However, Scandinavian societies view the humane orientation and self-protective leadership dimension quite negatively. These are the lowest scores, indicating that they reject the leadership behaviors, which include attributes such as self-centered, status conscious, and conflicting inducing. Overall, the profile of an outstanding Nordic European leader will be someone who is performance-oriented and visionary and very participative. In the case of Latin American countries, we can see that they also present a high charismatic type, but a medium participative characteristic. They too have a high team-oriented quality, but a low autonomous. And finally, they have a high self-protective and a medium humane orientation, very different from Nordic Europe. Over with Salma, she can elaborate on their practices and incorporate ethics and sustainability in their management.
Thanks, Mauricio. Now, talking about ethics of Nordic countries, they value more corporate culture, and these companies have a flat hierarchy between owners and employees. In which case, in Latin American companies, it's the opposite. Latinos tend to make distance between the owner and employee, and they don't allow them to participate that easily. Frequently, sustainability refers to consciousness of the actions of the world. However, sustainability could also refer to the awareness on the impact of the organizational structure and environment of a working company. Moreover, Nordic business owners look for long-term results rather than profit, while in most Latin American companies, they look more for profit and short-term results, and they are not sustainable. In Peru, there are businesses of mining, such as a project, Conga, which natives didn't want their exploration due to contamination and non-sustainable methods. Nowadays, industrialization has brought good and bad things. Researchers and scientists have warned us. Norway is the most sustainable country in the world, with Denmark and Sweden, and Finland being in the top 10. As an example, Denmark in 1996 has cut their CO2 emissions more than half, and in 2019, nearly half of their electricity was generated from wind power. While in Mexico is still growing its production of wind power, since 2016, they have doubled their capacity. This has been said, the Danish government has taken action, and this could be a recommendation for Latin American governments. Finally, Nordic business over the years have taken action implementing their mission and vision to practice sustainable in their companies. Nevertheless, Latin American countries are starting to implement their consciousness. Up next, we have some external factors that affect business in Nordic and Latin American countries.
Thank you, Salma. So regarding labor unions, Nordic countries have unions that play a more relevant role in economics and politics than in most other countries. They have strong organizational success and are strong actors in bargaining and policymaking. There's even laws that state that union representatives must have a seat on corporate boards, which affect leaders because they must be open about company policy and must always consult unions representatives before introducing mandates and taking decisions. On the other hand, Latin American countries don't have such strong unions, and they don't have much influence on business. This is because they don't have as strong of a legal backing. There's even countries like Peru that have legal regulations that impede significant numbers of workers to establish unions in a company or industry. Then, another external factor to consider is the government's influence on leadership practices. In the case of Nordic Europe, the government has great influence on economic policies, and there is a high governmental regulation once a business has been established. There are also complex labor laws, which give workers strong protection and social service programs. This affects business leaders since it makes it very hard for them to recruit talent from other countries. This is because they have very high individual tax rates, which makes it less attractive. In the case of Latin American countries, the government's influence comes from the high political risk. For example, Peru has a newly established populist government with low acceptance rates, and it has experienced great economic drops, which directly affects business. Finally, one should also take into account the influence that society has on leadership practices. In the case of Nordic Europe, society is always aware of a company's accountability regarding their sustainability goals and ethics, and only supports businesses that protect the environment and have fair workplace practices. Business leaders should be aware of this, as they need to ensure these goals stay at the highest priorities in management. In the case of Latin American countries, CSR does not hold as much importance for society, as there is little information available and it is at times considered a fad or a marketing strategy. Therefore, this might not have to be the highest priority for business leaders in these countries, but it's an issue that needs to be revised in the future as society becomes more demanding of these aspects.
Thank you, Christina. As we can see, there are some aspects that we need to take in consideration. First, in northern countries, communication is very direct and they are reserved. They don't use a lot of body language and respect a lot of personal space. While in Latin America, it's the opposite. They are loud, indirect, and like to have physical contact while talking. Therefore, we will recommend being open and understanding in order to success in business in this country. Second place, management is Nordic business is more formal and strategic than Latin American countries. We have personal connection and it can be crucial. To this, we recommend that leaders should be aware to the different business protocols in these countries and try to adapt their leadership styles for any new or established business relationship. Finally, adopting Nordic business management to Latin American countries can be very beneficial due to sustainability and the positive function of a business. Therefore, we recommend the leaders they need to be more focused on the future rather than the present and have a flexible environment allowing more interaction in the business environment.
Thank you for tuning in this morning's edition of the news. Until next time. Up next, we have the weather.